It's the What's on My Bookshelf show. Yeah, the What's on My Bookshelf show. Alright, we're back with a very special 25th anniversary edition of What's on My Bookshelf. Not really, this is episode 4. I actually started shooting this one and had to stop and restart because down here at the fourth shelf we kind of got a shadow issue, and we still kind of do, but I set up a little light to try to help out. So we're going to start on the left. I got about a third of the way through this, so let's see if it's a little smoother. This is The Hateful Eight. In my first attempt here, I got in this whole review on the movie, and this is not a movie review show, so I'm just going to say this is the special edition 70mm Roadshow book that they gave out when I saw this in the theater. And it's not one of Quentin's best movies, but it's alright. There's some cool scenes. I like Samuel L. Jackson. Solar Cat book, Jim Augustine. This is actually a first print edition. I ordered it online. It came from some library. I met him at a NorCal Solar event. He signed it for me. And it's also cool, this library is in a place called Bad Axe. Bad Axe. And Jim signed it. This is a book, teaches you all about solar through cats, mainly. Cats are in all the illustrations, and it teaches you what you need to know. Meow. It's a good primer. Next up, we got The Scholar Warrior, Deng Ming Dao. We reviewed a Deng Ming Dao book back in our first episode. It was The Living I Ching, taught you how to throw the I Ching. This is his book on Taoism in the 20th century, modern Taoism. It's pretty cool. It's got all kinds of herbs and drawings of stretches, and teach you how to be a good Taoist in the 20th century. I'm going to throw it out on the floor. And also, we left this one on the floor, but this actually came from this shelf. This is Jon Stewart's A Visitor's Guide to the Human Race. It's a cool book about what aliens would think about us if they came and visited us. And it's full of pictures, and it's written by his whole Comedy Central team. It's awesome. It's freaking hilarious, actually. You should give it a shot if you like to laugh. Seeking to Master the Mo-Pai, Adventures with John Chang. Not much to say about this. John Chang is a really interesting dude. Qigong, Nikong is actually what he's practicing. Could be full of shit, could be legit. You could look up the documentary Ring of Fire. It takes place in Indonesia if you want to learn more about John Chang. Or you could read his other books by Costas Daniels. This guy's dead. This guy might just be trying to cash in on the name. I don't know, but it was a good book. Man in the High Castle, back to Philip K. Dick. Last week we talked about androids and electric sheep. This is another one of his books. It's also a show, as I mentioned, on some channel, premium channel, HBO, whatnot. This one's cool. It's kind of got like a Taoist World War II Nazi thing going on. I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. Artwork by my buddy, old roommate, and accomplished artist Gustavo Vasquez. He worked for Marvel, among other top-line comic book publications, and this is some of his art. You should check him out. This is a book I haven't read. And actually, this shelf has a handful of books I haven't read. This book is by Varga Llosa. He's probably got like 4 names. That's usually how it is down there. But he's a writer and kind of political thinker that ran for president in Peru. I'm pretty sure he didn't win. In fact, I'm positive he didn't win. But a friend gave me this book. She wanted me to read it. And that was a long time ago, and I've yet to read it. But it lives on the shelf, so it goes in the show. Taoist Meditation, Thomas Cleary. Again, Cleary's probably translated like 500 books of Chinese philosophy. This is Taoist Meditation. Get down on it. This is a book I read about half of. Life. It's a very biological based study on the complete history of life on this planet. Something I was curious about, so I ordered this book on Amazon, and it's dense. It's pretty cool. I didn't finish it though, so that must say something about it. California for Camping, complete guide for more than 1,400 tent and RV campgrounds in California. You need guides like this. This is Moon. We've talked about Rough Guides. There's a Rough Guide up on the shelf before, and Lonely Planet, and then Moon. Those are kind of like the three in the travel book game. That's basically what it says. This is 2 complete screenplays of Oliver Stone's earlier works, Platoon and Salvador. Salvador is pretty cool. It's his first movie, starred James Woods and Jim Belushi. I liked it. Platoon, everyone knows Platoon. But there's just some screenplays of his. At the time, I liked reading screenplays a lot, so I used to have a lot. This is a comic book. Not really supposed to be comic books in here. This is hardcover, so I guess that's why I put it in here. Batman Grendel, Devil's Riddle. Grendel's a sick character, Matt Wagner. He created him. He kind of fucks Batman over in this one. It's cool. I haven't read that in years. I can't really remember what happens, but... Awakening Healing Energy Through the Tao. Mantak Chia. We talked about this guy before. He's the Chinese alchemist guy who studied in the West and was able to translate a lot of this inner energy work through the lens of Western medicine and terminology. So this is a pretty sweet book if you're into all that. Inner work. 2012 championship season, Orange Waves of Giants by Steve Hermanos. This is a cool book. I heard this guy interviewed on KNBR. He wrote all this poetry about the Giants winning their 2012 championship. So I got the book. It's orange. Baseball Poems Volume 2. I don't know what Volume 1 was, but this is about the World Series, so it's tight. He might have done one in 2010. Christopher Columbus, The Four Voyages. This guy was kind of a right fuckhead, but it's history, so you can read it. And you can read about all the nasty shit he did that they kind of brush over it. Conveniently, right next to it, we got Las Casas. Bartolomé de las Casas. He was kind of like the counterpoint. He kind of exposed a lot of the... he was a Jesuit, I think. I think he was a Jesuit. Exposed a lot of the bullshit that was going on with Columbus in the early days of the New World. When you read that popular Onion comic that's always posting the what I learned about Christopher Columbus that people post every year on the interwebs around Columbus Day, this is the guy they're shouting out saying the day should actually be named after him. Las Casas. He had debates with the Pope and stuff. Pretty big guy. The Grief Recovery Handbook. This is super famous. I guess I read this at some point. 20th Anniversary Expanded Edition. Dealing with loss, moving beyond death, divorce, and other losses. That's there. I don't know why I'm laughing. I had some serious shit I had to deal with on that, but I feel better now. Here's another Deng Ming Dao. Everyday Dao. This is kind of like daily affirmations. The road. My focus is slipping. Marshall. Los. I don't fucking know. I'm not going to edit that, but that was kind of whack. Anyways. Deng Ming Dao. More Taoist stuff. Bear, Singing to the Plants. This is a guide to mestizo shamanism in the Upper Amazon. This guy's been doing the gringo shamanism thing out in Iquitos for a good 30 years. Sweet book. I'm actually not done with it. Ayahuasca. You could go hang with this guy in Iquitos if you want. Catch a flight. Ask around town. He's there. And he'll hook you up. I can't slip this in. Oh, this book's awesome. Open Veins of Latin America. We've discussed Eduardo Galeano before. He actually just died about a year and a half ago. This is his seminal work, 5 Centuries of the Pillage of a Continent. And it's pretty badass. I learned so much about the history of the New World, as they call it, reading this guy. And I really like his writing style. And it's just poetic and historical and fascinating. That book's great. That's also the book, by the way, that, remember, what's his name is dead now? Not Castro, the Venezuelan president, Hugo Chavez. When he met Obama, this is the book he handed Obama. So there you go. Just slip that back in. Rooftop Revolution, Danny Kennedy, founder, one of the founders of Sungevity, big solar company. This is his book. They still use that same kind of graphic style in their marketing for the company. Um, Sungevity, Danny Kennedy, I don't know. It's kind of like blowing his own horn, but I liked it. I thought it was interesting. It was cool to read how they founded Sungevity. And they always win our Solar Battle of the Bands contest that we throw each year because they got a good band, funk. They bring the funk from Oakland. This is Running the Amazon. If you recall, last week we reviewed Walking the Amazon. There it is. This is Running the Amazon, which I haven't read. I read Walking the Amazon, and I thought I should get Running the Amazon too. It's not about running like on feet. It's about a guy kayaking his way down the Amazon. Joe Kane. The story of the first expedition to run the entire length of the Earth's longest river, a terrific adventure. A torrent of stories. See, a torrent of stories from the first dusty road. I mean, wouldn't it be a dusty river? To the final champagne drunk at the Atlantic. There you go. I like champagne. And I bet I'd like that book because I like adventure books. This is Kingdom of the World, a novel. Carpenter. This is pretty interesting. It's about Haiti and the revolution against France back in the day. This is I researched magical realism after I read 100 Years of Solitude, and I found out that this guy was another kind of pioneer of that genre, so that's how I ended up with this book. But it's really good, and it's not very long, and it's great. Galiano again, same author of the Open Veins that we just reviewed. We talked about his trilogy last week. This is the first book of his trilogy, so I won't go into it. This is kind of, like I said, a fictionalized James missionarized version of Open Veins of Latin America in 3 parts that takes place over like 500 years. And kind of follows a bunch of families and stuff. It's pretty cool. This is again translated by Cleary. Yes, he did do some Japanese stuff too. Shobogenzo Zen Essays by Dogen. Dogen is super famous, and Shobogenzo is probably his most famous work. So there you go. I'm not really Zen, you know. I'm like a Theravada Buddhist. Insight, meditation, mindfulness. Zen, it's a bunch of cones. It's cool. It was like one of the last evolutions of Buddhism because it went from India, it went north up in Tibet, and at the same time it went south into India, Greater India, and Southeast Asia, and then it made its way into China, and that's like Chan Buddhism, and integrated with Taoism, and then finally it squirted its way across the whatever that ocean is to Japan, and Zen. So Zen was kind of like the last. Well, I guess American and Western Buddhism is actually the last stop on the train. But anyways, we're getting off track. Century of Wind. So this is the third or the second book of Galiano's trilogy. So now we've reviewed the whole trilogy. Don't have to talk about it anymore. I think that's the middle one. One Breath at a Time, Buddhism in the 12 Steps. Yeah, this guy came and spoke in my Sangha. Ended up getting a used copy of his book. Kevin Griffin. He's kind of a trip. He 12 step. He was in recovery. The 11th step in the 12-step program. I'm not in recovery or anything, but the 11th step in the 12-step program is to take up meditation practice and continue it for the rest of your life. So a lot of people, there's a lot of crossover in the Buddhist communities and the meditation communities and the recovery communities. And this book kind of bridges that gap. So it was somewhat useful when I happened to be stopping smoking weed around the time that I read that. This lady's a trip. Nicole Maxwell, Witch Doctor's Apprentice. She's real. She knows. She's like a vault of knowledge on a bunch of tribes that have now been wiped out, and their medicinal practices and all kinds of plant practices. Very, very interesting lady. Great book. You can also catch her talking on the internet in the 80s. She did a whole bunch of talks with Terence McKenna. She's interesting. She found that all these plants for fertility and to prevent conception, actually, which could have been pretty useful, but a lot of her information got stomped out by the pharmaceutical companies, of course. Slip that back in there. She knew this guy. The story of Manuel Cordova Rios. This is the Wizard of the Upper Amazon. We talked about him in this book. Right there. The Three Halves of Eno Moxo. That's like kind of the best book on Manuel Cordova Rios. But he was a Peruvian that got kidnapped by a tribe, and they kind of used him as a repository for a lot of their knowledge. They needed a white guy because they needed someone that could communicate with the outside world and help procure guns, actually. But he ended up learning a lot about shamanism and he wasn't a white guy. I mean, he was a Peruvian, but anyways, this is the first book that was written about him, The Wizard of the Upper Amazon. Bruce Lamb wrote it. I guess he had met him, but also Nicole Maxwell met him, and she kind of demystifies him and kind of talks about him more as just the human being that he was. But last we have The Feminine Face of Buddhism. I picked this up at a Sangha. It was a free book because I was working on a documentary at the time. Actually, I was working on a GoFundMe campaign at the time for some bhikkhunis who are female Theravada Buddhist monks. And so I grabbed this book and gave it a read. It's pretty short and it's pretty fascinating. It's worth giving a shot. What's this? This is some sort of Bolivian governmental document, Magisterial al Socialismo Rural Federation 2010 to 2011. This is some sort of campaign thing related to Evo Morales, I guess. I got my hands on. Anyways, that's the fourth shelf. Hope you enjoyed it. This one's kind of long. And blah, blah, blah. See you back here. We're coming down to the fifth shelf, which are the paperbacks. And it's really dark down there, so we have to really get a lighting situation going on. See you next week. Ciao, ciao. It's the What's on My Bookshelf show. Yeah, the What's on My Bookshelf show.